Rescued. A story of cats, dogs, crooks, and cops. A prequel to the Detective Whiskers Cozy Mystery series. By Chris Abernathy. Read for you by the author. Monday. Bully loved his home. The big bulldog rolled onto his back in the soft grass, letting the sun warm his belly. It was a good day to be outside. He liked being outside, as long as his family remembered to leave plenty of fresh water in his bowl, which they always did. They were a good family. He was especially fond of the girl, Emma. Some girls preferred little dogs like toy poodles and Pomeranians, but she'd walked past the small dogs at the adoption day event and chosen him with his big bulldog head and stocky frame. It was love at first sight. He didn't even mind it when she made him wear funny outfits. She'd told him the other day that something special was coming for the 4th of July. Bully was going to be in a pet parade. His first time, and he was excited about it. Nobody was at home at the moment. They'd all driven away a few minutes earlier. He had watched through a crack in the fence and listened as the family car disappeared past a van parked by the curb and then down the street out of sight. They would be back. They always came back. The neighborhood was quiet. Bully could barely hear the rumble of cars on the busy highway a couple of blocks away. Birds chirped, leaves rustled in the big maple tree, and there was a soft clink, followed by the creak of an opening door. Or gate. Bully flipped over and stood on his 4 paws, staring at the open gate. He hadn't heard the car pull up. Was Emma home again already? The gate remained open, but nobody walked in. Bully went to investigate. Standing with his head poking just beyond the frame of the fence, Bully still didn't see anyone. But he smelled something good, like the treats Emma often gave him after dinner. Looking down, he saw one in the grass just outside the fence. Bully knew he wasn't supposed to leave the backyard without Emma or her parents, but it was just a step or two for a yummy treat. He gobbled it up, smiled, and started to turn around before noticing another treat a few steps away. It was yummy too, and so was the next one, and the one after that. A trail of yummy treats had appeared on the lawn, leading to the street. Bully nosed his way ahead, devouring each treat as he came to it, feeling like the luckiest dog in the world. At the end of the trail was the van he'd seen parked on the street. The back doors were wide open now. On the floor of the van, the treat bag had spilled over. Bully hopped in, ready for a feast. The doors closed. The back of the van got dark, and Bully felt himself moving away from home. Chapter 2. Bananas. Get 'em inside quick, boys. I need this produce sorted and on the shelves before the store gets busy. 3 teenage boys hustled to pull boxes of fruits and vegetables off the delivery truck and into the back of Sammy's downtown market. Sammy watched and barked instructions while enjoying his 3rd cup of coffee. He'd unloaded plenty of trucks in his day. It was somebody else's turn now. He watched his young employees and wondered if one of them had what it took to work their way up the chain like he had. That thought didn't last long. Stop! You don't stack apples on top of strawberries. Do I still have to do this myself? Sammy set his coffee cup on the asphalt and grabbed a heavy box. If he was honest, he still enjoyed this part of the job, as long as he didn't have to do too much of it. Paperwork. That was what he was avoiding by being out here with the truck. A crash inside the store got Sammy's attention. It was followed by yelling. Then somebody stuck their head out the back door. "There's a dog loose in the store." The young woman disappeared back inside. Sammy and the 3 boys followed in a hurry. A tall man in blue jeans, a t-shirt, a baseball cap, and bright red cowboy boots, waited for the door to close, then stepped out from behind the corner of the grocery store. He quickly walked between boxes of apples, strawberries, potatoes, and lettuce until he reached the bananas. Picking up a box, he carried it around the corner and set it down in the back of his van before returning for another box. When all of the bananas were in the van, he got into the front seat and drove away. Chapter 3. The Queen's Crown. Tuesday. Hey, Grady, if you had one of those stones on top of a ring, even you could get a girl to say yes. The 4 policemen walking in the door of the museum exhibit hall laughed good-naturedly at the young officer standing inches away from the glass display case in the center of the room. Grady stood up straight and pretended not to be interested. It's not the real thing, you know. An older officer walked up to the display and stared inside at the golden crown encrusted with massive diamonds. It's an exact replica, though, of one of the most valuable crowns in the world, the Queen's Crown of Denmark. And the diamonds are real enough, so is the gold. They borrowed diamonds from all over the world to make it for this fancy tour, and until Saturday, it's our job to protect it. Best week ever, said a third officer who had sat himself down on a plush velvet chair in the corner. Relaxing in air-conditioned comfort instead of pounding the streets. He put his hands behind his head and slid down in the chair, letting his feet stretch out in front of him. Ah, yeah. Best week ever. The tallest of the policemen kicked the sitting man's feet, making him fall out of the chair. We ain't here to guard the chair, Barney. We're guarding the Queen's crown, and we won't be taking it easy. Get up. They're opening the doors in just a minute. You need to be alert and ready. Barney stood up and frowned at the taller man. He opened and closed his mouth, mocking the ranking officer while his back was turned. When his superior turned around, Barney was caught with his mouth open, so he had to speak. Relax, Ronnie. Nobody's going to try to steal this thing in the middle of a big museum with security all around. If anybody's going to make a move, it'll be while the crown's being transported to the park for the play. The last of the officers, a shorter man with the buttons on his uniform stretching over his belly, gave a disgusted look. Ugh, the play. I hate Hamlet. My mom took me to one of those Shakespeare in the Park things when I was a kid. Couldn't understand a word of it. Every time I fell asleep, she'd poke me with her elbow. My ribs were black and blue. The crowd won't be there to see the play, Brian, said the older man in the middle of the room. They'll be there to see Sophie Thorson. Brian's eyes flew open wide. Are you kidding, Fred? Sophie's coming here? They just announced it. She'll be playing the Queen and wearing that crown. The country of Denmark wants to make sure as many people as possible see it, so they'll want to visit the real crown jewels and spend some tourist dollars. Brian grinned. Nobody will even notice the crown unless she holds it in front of her big. That's enough, Brian. We get the picture. Ronnie shook his head. His phone vibrated, and he took it out of his pocket to read the message. Fred, it's your lucky day. How's that? There's a new case that needs to be investigated, and all of the detectives are tied up on this detail. They want me to send somebody to check it out. Since you're still trying to get a detective desk, I guess that'll be you. Fred perked up. What's the case? It's bananas. What do you mean, bananas? Something crazy? I mean the yellow fruit you peel and eat. Sammy's downtown grocery. Somebody stole a few cases. Go get 'em, hotshot. All of the officers laughed as Fred adjusted his equipment belt and walked out of the exhibit hall. Fred grumbled to himself as he drove his squad car away from the fancy museum district toward downtown. He glanced down at the switch for the lights and siren. Not necessary today. Bananas. Pulled away from guarding gold and diamonds to locate a few missing bananas. The other guys could laugh all they wanted. They'd be walking the streets in their uniforms for the rest of their careers, but not him. He may only have 6 years left before retirement, but he was going to spend them as a detective, wearing plain clothes to work and solving the exciting cases, like stolen produce. He pulled into the parking lot of the grocery store and found the first open space. The front door slid open for him, revealing a big mess of overturned shelves and cans all over the floor. Several teenagers were scurrying around, trying to clean up. A man rushed up to him, holding one end of a rope. The other end was tied around a bulldog. "What are you going to do about this?" Fred tried to be patient. He heard the words of his old mentor repeating for the 1,000th time. A good police officer knows that the people he's coming into contact with are usually having one of the worst days of their lives. It's up to us to help them get settled down. He held out his right hand. "Officer Mason. And you are?" "Sammy, like on the sign." Sammy pointed at a wooden sign in the middle of the mess. It read, "Every sandwich deserves Sammy's freshest produce." "I'm just trying to keep my store open and feed this community. Then somebody sets this beast loose in my store, and by the time I get it under control, everything's a mess and all of my bananas are gone. I won't get another shipment in until next week. What kind of a grocery store have I got without bananas?" "Well, at least you won't have any slip and fall accidents to worry about." Sammy just stared at Fred. "Banana peels, like in the cartoons?" Fred shook it off. He looked around and spotted a security camera. "Does that work? If somebody walked in here and grabbed a load of bananas, it would be easy to see on the tape." Sammy turned and walked toward the back of the store, speaking as he went. "They didn't do it in here. It was out back." Fred followed. Walking through the back door, he scanned the building. No cameras outside. A delivery truck sat nearly empty, with boxes of fruits and vegetables scattered around. Pineapples, tomatoes, celery, everything you'd find in a produce section. Except bananas. "Did anybody see the thief?" Fred asked. "We were all inside chasing this dog, which I have no idea what to do with. No collar, no nothing. He might be rabid for all I know." Fred looked at the bulldog. The dog looked back at him, its big eyes pleading to be taken home. It didn't look rabid. It looked like somebody's best friend. He reached out to take the rope. "I'll see what I can do. About the bananas and the dog. I still want to look at the security camera footage, if you don't mind." Sammy huffed, then showed Fred to the office and pointed at the ancient video recorder. "Help yourself. I gotta get my store in shape." Rewinding the fuzzy black and white footage from the front of the store, Fred spotted the moment the dog arrived. A man with a baseball cap pulled over his face pushed the animal in the door, then walked away. It could have been almost anybody. Chapter 4. Rescue. All of the animals heard the car as it pulled up to the For the Love of Animals rescue. A pit bull in one of the front cages asked what they were all thinking. "What's it going to be? Pick up or drop off?" The animals murmured amongst themselves. The more recent arrivals were excited. Those who had been there longer tried not to get their hopes up. A young tuxedo cat walked calmly between the rows of cages toward the front and eyed the vehicle that matched his black and white fur. The driver's side door opened, and a man in uniform stepped out. He closed his door, opened the back door, and held a rope as a bulldog nervously jumped down from the floorboard. "Drop off," the pit bull said in a sad but accepting tone. Heads dropped, and most of the animals got back to doing nothing. A couple of rowdy dogs barked up a storm, taunting the new arrival. A woman walked out of the building at the end of the kennel. She approached the man and the dog. "Hello, handsome. What's your name?" "Fred. Officer Fred Mason." The woman knelt down and scratched under the dog's chin before looking up at the uniformed officer. "I was talking to the dog. But it's nice to meet you, Fred. I'm Allison." She stood up again and reached out her hand. Fred moved the rope from his right hand to his left and reached out to shake hands. The woman drew her hand back. "I was reaching for the rope." Fred's face went red. He held the rope out with his left hand. Allison laughed and took the rope. "I'm just messing with you. I love these guys, but they don't ever get my jokes. It's good to see another human." She sighed. "Even if they are leaving somebody behind. What's the matter? Is he too much to handle?" Allison knelt down again and stroked the bulldog's head and back. "You don't look like a troublemaker." Fred knelt beside Allison and scratched the bulldog's cheek. "Well, the folks at the grocery store might disagree. But he's been great for me, haven't you, fella?" "What was he doing in a grocery store?" Allison asked. Fred shook his head. "That's the big question. The only person who knows did a good job of hiding his face from the camera. I got called in to investigate a theft and left with a new friend." "Friend, huh?" Allison stood up and tried to hand the rope back to Fred. He didn't take it. "I wish I could, but, you know." Allison nodded. "Yeah, I know. Don't worry. We'll take good care of your friend. Somebody's probably looking for him. He doesn't look like he's been loose on the streets." She started walking the dog toward a gate in the kennel. "Is there any paperwork for me or anything?" Fred asked. Allison looked back. "You're not the owner, are you?" "No." "Then you're free to go. He's not your responsibility anymore." Fred stood and watched as Allison led the bulldog to an empty cage and locked it inside. The young woman reached into her pocket and offered a treat, but the dog refused. Allison walked back toward the office. "Thanks," she said to Fred, who was still standing and watching. "For what?" Fred asked. "For at least caring enough to bring him here. A lot of people don't even do that. They just shoo them away from their house or whatever and hope somebody else will handle it. You didn't do that, so thank you." She pulled the office door open and walked inside, letting the door close behind her. Fred got back in his squad car and drove away. "You should have taken the treat. They're really good." The tuxedo cat squatted outside the new arrival's cage. The dog set its head down on its front paws. "I don't ever want to eat another treat in my life. That's how I ended up here." "What are you in for?" asked the pit bull in the next cage. "Tear up the furniture? Bite somebody? Barking too loud?" "Ignore Bones. It doesn't matter why you're here." The cat glared at the pit bull for a long moment, then turned back to the bulldog. "It's not your fault." "Hi, I'm Whiskers." The bulldog didn't lift his head, but he did open his eyes and look up at the cat. "Bully, and it is my fault. They told me 100 times to stay in the backyard. They took care of everything I needed, played with me, dressed me up nice." He finally lifted his head and glared at the pit bull, daring him to say something about dogs who let humans dress them up. Bones kept his mouth shut. "All it took was an open gate and a trail of treats, and I was out of there, jumping into a strange van. Next thing I know, some guy wearing red cowboy boots is pushing me in the front door of a grocery store. I freaked out, messed the place up, and here I am." He rested his head on his paws again. "What is this place, anyway?" "You, my friend, have found yourself at the best animal rescue in town. For the love of animals rescue. Food twice a day, toys to play with, and there's a nice little park out back. Sometimes people visit just to play with us or take us for a walk." Bully's head stayed on his paws, and his eyes closed. "You're new, so Allison will take your picture soon. She'll put it online. Maybe your family will see it and come to get you. You'll probably be out of here in no time." Bully lifted his head slightly and cracked his left eye open. Bones laughed. "Huh, good one, Whiskers. He's one of us now." Bully stood up and charged the side of his cage, trying to get to Bones. The pit bull stood his ground. "Keep it up and you'll never get out of here. Nobody takes home an angry dog." The office door opened and Allison walked into the kennel, holding a collar and a lead. "Are you ready for your close-up?" she asked as she opened the door to Bully's cage. Placing the collar around his big neck, she attached the lead and walked him out to a large grassy area behind the kennel. "Go ahead and take care of business if you need to while I get the camera ready." Bully realized he did need to relieve himself. He sniffed around for a good spot, but the smells were overwhelming. No sense marking your territory around here. Every blade of grass had been claimed and reclaimed 100 times. Allison had set up a tripod and placed her cell phone at the top. She pulled a large basket from beside the building and dumped out the contents. There were lots of toys. Everything from cars and trucks to rubber bones and thick ropes with knots tied in them, frisbees, plush toys in the shape of teddy bears, zoo animals, and movie characters. Even shoes, because some animals would rather play with a shoe than anything else. And there were balls, lots of balls, footballs, tennis balls, a soccer ball, exactly like the one Emma kicked around for him in their backyard at home. Bully walked over to the soccer ball and lay his chin on top of it, with his front paws on either side. "That's perfect," Allison said as she set the tripod in front of Bully and started snapping pictures. "You look fantastic. Now, say cheese." When she was finished taking pictures, Allison picked up a tennis ball and threw it across the grass. Bully looked, but didn't chase after it. "It's okay. You don't have to play if you don't want to. Ready to go back?" Bully wasn't ready to go back to the cage, but he let Allison lead him there and walked inside without giving her any trouble. Later, she brought dinner for each of the animals and gave them all a chance to play in the grass, a few at a time. The animals in cages near Bully tried to cheer him up, except Bones. Bones seemed set on making everybody miserable. Bully pretended not to hear, and when it got dark, he closed his eyes. Eventually, he slept, and he dreamed of Emma, kicking the soccer ball for him in their backyard. "That was delicious. Your chicken parmesan gets better every time you cook it." Fred pushed the dinner plate away from him and wiped his mouth with his napkin. Sheila eyed Fred's plate. "You didn't finish your broccoli." She let him squirm for a moment before picking up the plate and carrying it to the sink. "How did it go at the museum? I heard on TV that Sophie Thorson is coming to be in the play and wear the crown." "Sophie who?" Fred pretended not to recognize the name. "Ha!" Sheila laughed. "You know exactly who she is. You always stop scanning the TV channels when she comes on looking like she's going to burst out of her dress." She looked back to see Fred's cheeks turn red. "Is the crown as beautiful as it looks on television?" Fred was happy to change the subject. "The crown is incredible, but I was barely there to see it. Ronnie sent me to investigate some stolen bananas." Sheila paused her work at the sink. "Bananas? Are you joking?" "It's no joke." Fred shook his head. "I'll never make detective if that's the only kind of case they give me. But I made a new friend." "That's nice. You should have invited him home for dinner. You know I always make enough for leftovers or unexpected guests." Fred laughed. "I'm sure he would have loved your cooking, but I suspect his table manners aren't quite up to your expectations. He's a bulldog. He was lost, so I dropped him off at an animal rescue." Sheila looked at Fred with soft eyes. "Then you definitely should have brought him home." Fred looked down at his hands on the table, but he could feel Sheila watching, trying to see how he reacted. "He was somebody's pet and didn't look like he'd been lost for long. I'm sure they'll be looking for him. He won't be there long." He paused, hoping to hear the sound of Sheila scrubbing dishes again, but the room was silent. "And I'm not ready. Not yet." Fred excused himself from the table and went downstairs to the office he'd made for himself in the basement. He heard water running in the sink again as he walked out of the kitchen. Chapter 5. Tiger and Butterscotch. Wednesday. Tall grass hid the hunter from view. Inch by inch, she crept closer to her prey, careful not to disturb the blades any more than they swayed naturally in the gentle summer breeze. Peeking through the green veil, yellow eyes locked onto the gray fur that was now within striking distance. Tiger held still, controlling every breath and preparing each of her muscles. The mouse began to move, and the orange tabby leapt into action. Exposed claws gripped the mouse, but something didn't feel right. Why was it so rubbery? Why didn't it put up a fight? And what was this string attached to the nose? Questions came quickly, answers just as fast. A shadow passed over Tiger, and instantly her world went dark. Thick cotton surrounded her, and she felt herself being lifted and carried away. Butterscotch loved the dog park. Randy brought her several times a week when the weather was nice like this. They both needed to get out of their small apartment. A 6'2" attorney and a long-legged golden retriever required room to roam. As usual, Randy had walked Butterscotch to the gate, then unlatched the lead from her collar and let her run inside the fence to greet her friends. There was lots of sniffing and chasing. Randy would watch for a few minutes, chat with some of the other humans, then settle in on his favorite bench with whatever book he was reading at the time. Mostly he read science fiction, stories about people exploring other worlds, other galaxies. Sometimes it seemed he preferred life on another planet to the life he and Butterscotch shared, and he got so involved in his books that the world around him faded away. Butterscotch didn't mind at all. She could play at the park for hours, and sometimes she did. Other dogs would come and go, and Butterscotch would greet them, then say goodbye, while Randy flew through space, fighting off pirates in rusty rockets. They'd been there for about half an hour on this day. It was more crowded than normal, and Butterscotch was catching her breath. She was a little surprised when the lead was suddenly clipped back onto her collar. Disappointed, she obediently walked toward the gate and was already outside the fence before she realized the person holding her lead wasn't Randy. Chapter 6. Hazardous Area. A man wearing work boots, blue jeans, and a fluorescent orange vest over his long-sleeve shirt walked out of the hardware store carrying 2 plastic bags that sagged from the heavy purchases he'd made. Carefully, hoping the bags didn't rip before he reached his truck, he transferred one of the bags from his right hand to his left and reached into his front pocket. He pulled out his keys, pointed them toward the truck, and clicked a button on the key fob. A chirping noise indicated that the truck door was now unlocked. Seconds later, as the man was about to set the bags in the truck bed, a golden retriever ran around the vehicle, surprising him. The dog wasn't wearing a collar and seemed confused. Worried that it might run into traffic, the man dropped his bags and moved quickly but carefully toward the dog. "Please say your name into the microphone and spell it so I can make sure we get it right on TV." Fred cleared his throat and adjusted his collar before speaking a little too loudly into the microphone the TV reporter had pointed at him. "Of course, Miss Quinn. It's Officer Fred Mason. F-R-E-D-M-A-S. Ronnie, the ranking officer working the museum protection detail, interrupted. "Sorry, Fred. Got another big case we need you to investigate. I'll handle this. Hi, Kendall." He smiled at the attractive reporter. "Senior Officer Ronnie Wade. R-O-N." Ronnie handed Fred a scribbled note and grinned as he spoke. Fred left the museum, reading the note as he walked out. City Hardware and Lumber, vehicle break-in. He got in his squad car and looked again at the switch for the lights and siren. It was tempting to use the siren to interrupt Ronnie's interview, but he couldn't justify it. He started the car and drove to the hardware store. Fred parked beside a truck where a man in a fluorescent vest was sitting on the tailgate looking down at his phone. The man set his phone down on the tailgate when he noticed the black and white car. "Can we make this quick? I need to get back to work. They're waiting on these nails." He put his left hand on one of the shopping bags in the truck bed. Fred pulled a small notebook from his uniform shirt pocket. "Just tell me what happened and you can be on your way." The man dropped from his seat on the tailgate and walked beside the truck. He pointed at the store entrance. "I was walking out of the store, and this dog—" His finger moved from the store to the cab of his truck, where a golden retriever had its nose pressed to the cracked open window. "She just ran out in front of me, then took off. I didn't want her to get hurt, so I went after her. When I got back here, my ID badge and my hard hat were gone." "You had left them in the truck?" "Hard hat on the dashboard and security badge dangling around the rear view." Fred wrote the information in his notebook. "Did you see who did it?" The man shook his head. "What about cameras?" Fred looked along the exterior of the building. "I asked the manager before I called you. He's got one that shows me walking out, but nothing in the parking lot." The man looked at the dog in his truck. "I can't take her to work with me. Do you guys handle stray animals?" Fred watched the dog sniffing through the cracked window. "The city has a department for that, but they can take hours to respond. Not enough staff. Here, write your name and number in my notepad, and I'll make sure she's taken care of." He handed the notepad to the man and let the dog sniff his hand. A vibrating noise got their attention. The man's phone was still on the tailgate, and he was getting a call. The screen said, "Boss." "Gotta take this," he said, handing the notepad back to Fred. "Jackson." He held the phone away from his ear and winced. "Yeah, I'll be there in a minute. Just wrapping up with the police officer." His eyebrows scrunched down, and his voice got deeper as he turned to look at Fred. "I'll bring him with me." Fred got back in his squad car and followed the truck to a construction site a few blocks away. A 4-story office building was still in the early stages. A security guard in the parking area handed them each a hard hat and pointed to a trailer. "The foreman's in there." He looked at Jackson. "I wouldn't make him wait 1 second longer." Before Fred and Jackson could reach the trailer, a door opened on the side and a burly man rushed down the metal steps, scowling at the construction worker. "You left your ID on your mirror again, didn't you?" He didn't wait for an answer before turning his attention to Fred. "Come inside and watch this." The walls inside the trailer were covered with permits and architectural drawings. There were a couple of folding chairs and a desk with stacks of paper surrounding a computer monitor turned toward a rolling chair underneath a small window. The foreman swiveled the monitor around and searched for a space large enough to roll the computer mouse around. When he found one, he clicked on a video which started playing on the monitor. There was no sound, just a wide-angle view of the construction site. "This guy." The foreman pointed to a figure walking into the middle of the screen. The camera was zoomed too far out to see any details, but Fred was able to see the individual stop and look around. After a moment, a bubble appeared in front of the man's face, growing to about the size of his head. Then, something darted away from the man, and the bubble followed it. The foreman gestured wildly with his hands. "He tied a balloon to a cat and dropped it in the middle of my construction site." The video showed several workers trying to catch the cat, but the foreman pointed back to the first man, who calmly walked a few steps, picked something up, and walked back out of the camera's view. "What was that?" Fred asked. "What did he take?" The foreman waved his arms again angrily. "My drone!" Fred wrote in his notepad. "Like they used to get video from above?" The foreman nodded. "Yeah, but this one does more than that. It can carry stuff. We use it to get tools and supplies up to the top of the building." He glared at Jackson. "Like those nails I've been waiting on all morning." "Oh, yeah." Jackson turned to go back to his truck where he'd left the 2 shopping bags. He looked back at Fred. "You gonna come get that dog and take it to the shelter or whatever?" Fred put his notebook back in his pocket and started to follow Jackson. The foreman caught the trailer door before it closed and stuck his head out. As long as you're making a trip. He whistled and waved over another worker. Campbell, give him that cat. Chapter 7. Rescue times 2. Pick up or drop off, Bones barked. Whiskers walked past the front row of cages to where he had a good view of the arriving car. It was the same black and white car as the day before. That happens sometimes. Humans have second thoughts after leaving their pets at the rescue. He had a theory. Parents drop off the animals while their kids are at school, then return when the kids raise a fuss. Bully, it's been nice knowing you. The bulldog lifted his head off his paws and looked in the direction of the car. But it wasn't his family's car. He watched Fred step out of the driver's side, then set his head back down. Bones looked at Bully. You don't want to go home? Bully did want to go home. More than anything else in the world, he wanted to be back playing with Emma in their backyard. But the police officer didn't even know where Bully lived. He's not my family. Really? Bones seemed stunned by the news. I thought he was just lying yesterday. They do that, you know. Humans. Bully stood up and stared at Bones through the chain-link fencing between them. Not my family. There was a steely resolve in his voice. Whiskers watched as the policeman opened the back door of his car again. Drop off. Sorry, Bully. I really thought... He didn't finish the thought. The golden retriever emerged from the back seat, her golden hair shining in the sunlight. Allison came out of the office to meet Fred and the golden retriever. You look tired and hungry. Fred nodded. I had to skip lunch. Allison shook her head and pulled out a dog treat. I don't feed humans. You'll have to get your own lunch. She held the treat out for the dog. 2 animals in 2 days? What's up? I wish I knew, Fred said, handing the lead to Allison. And it's actually 3 animals in 2 days. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a box with holes cut in it. A cat. Allison gave him a disapproving look. You're up to something, and I don't like it. Hey, I'm not the bad guy here. Somebody is using these animals as a diversion to steal things. They stole several cases of bananas yesterday with the help of the bulldog I brought in. Today, they set this golden retriever loose in a busy parking lot to get a construction worker's ID badge, then used it and the cat to steal a drone from a building site. We've got them on video setting the cat loose with a balloon tied to its tail. Despicable. The skeptical look Allison gave Fred told him the despicable comment could either be for the man abusing the animals, or for him if she didn't believe what he had told her. Sorry. My husband's upset because I haven't been able to take any time off. It doesn't look like that's changing anytime soon. Fred nodded politely. I've been here before, he said quietly. Allison was confused. I know that. You were here yesterday. Before that. Before you started working here, I guess. Our dog disappeared about a year ago. Fred stood still for a moment, lost in his thoughts. Anyway, maybe these 2 will have better luck. Allison smiled and nodded. Thanks to you, they've got a good chance. Neither of them have collars or tags? Fred shook his head. He opened the box lid enough to slide a hand inside and gently stroked the cat's orange fur. He quickly withdrew his hand and sucked on his finger where he'd been scratched. I think this one knows I'm a dog person. Allison led the dog into the office and held the door while Fred carried the cat in and quickly set the box down on a chair. Fred turned his attention to some flyers on the wall, pictures of cats and dogs with phone numbers. He lifted a new one to see an older flyer partially hidden beneath. A bulldog stared back at him with big, happy eyes. Fred's eyes glossed over, and he stood frozen in place until Allison handed him a poster. Can you stick this one up there for me? Fred gave his head a quick shake and took the poster advertising microchips. It stated that pets who had microchips implanted were 3 times more likely to be reunited with their owners. Did you check to see if the dog yesterday was microchipped? He asked. He was, Allison said. Unfortunately, his owners didn't update the information. I called the number listed, but it was out of service. The address was 2 states away. Happens more than you might think. Some people get their animals chipped and then never even bother to register them at all. She let go of the dog's lead. You be a good girl and wait here while I get the scanner. Are you talking to the dog or me? Fred joked timidly. Allison chuckled. Nice. Well played. She pulled a small device from a drawer and returned to the golden retriever. Let's take a look under your skin. She moved the scanner around the dog's back just behind her head. The scanner didn't beep. Just to be sure. Allison scanned the rest of the golden retriever's body, then scanned around her shoulders again. No luck. Do we dare open the box? She asked Fred. Fred rubbed his injured finger with his thumb and looked nervous. Allison laughed and handed him the scanner. Here, I'll hold the scary little kitty cat and you can scan. She reached into the box with both hands and lifted the cat out, holding her firmly but gently. Neck and shoulders. That's where it should be if there is one. Fred pushed a button on the front of the device and cautiously moved close to the cat. No beeping sound to indicate success. He waved it around, carefully avoiding the cat's paws. Are you sure the batteries are fresh? Allison set the cat back in the box and picked it up. Replaced them this morning so I could scan the bulldog. About half of the dogs that come in have chips. Cat's not even a third, so it's not surprising. You want to bring her? She nodded toward the dog who was squatted quietly on the floor. Fred picked up the lead and followed. Allison stopped at an empty cage and held the door open while Fred nudged the dog inside. We don't have any empty cat cages, so somebody's going to have to share, Allison said as she walked to the back of the kennel. Not this young lady, though. Not yet. We don't know how she'll do with the others, so we'll make room for her. Patches, you don't mind, do you? She removed a calico cat from a cage and set her inside a cage with another cat. Then she put the new cat in the empty cage and closed the door. I think we'll call you Ginger. My name is Tiger, the orange tabby hissed at Allison and Fred as they walked away. Whiskers padded up beside the policeman and rubbed his leg. Excuse me, officer. The dog you brought here yesterday, I thought you should know, he was stolen from his family. Fred stopped and looked down at the cat. If you're looking for a belly rub, you're talking to the wrong guy. I've just been reminded of why I prefer dogs. He glanced accusingly at the tabby. Allison reached down, but Whiskers darted away. Bones laughed from inside his cage. Keep on trying, Whiskers. They'll understand you one of these days. A couple of the other animals laughed as well. Fred walked out of the kennel, said his goodbyes to Allison, and disappeared down the street in his squad car. Whiskers watched until the car was gone, then went to welcome the new residents of For the Love of Animals Rescue, beginning with the cat. You said Tiger, right? Hi, I'm Whiskers. Tiger looked suspiciously at the black and white cat. Why aren't you in a cage? Patches answered. 'Cause they can't catch him. They gave up trying months ago. Another cat chimed in. I think it's because they don't need to. Whiskers could get out of here any time he wants, but he never leaves. You like the free food, don't you, Whiskers? Whiskers did like the free food. And the company. I wasn't brought here like the rest of the animals, he told Tiger. I went on an adventure, got lost, and spent a week in the woods before stumbling into this place. At first, it was just the food, but then I noticed that some families came here looking for their lost pets, so I hung around, hoping. You could have been in a nice house by now, though, Patches said. That's why he won't let them put him in a cage. Cats in cages might get adopted. He's waiting for his family to show up. Tiger looked out at Whiskers. Do you think my family will come? I do, Tiger. I think they'll look everywhere for you, including here. How did you get here anyway? Did you get lost like me? I knew exactly where I was, until some man threw a bag over me. He kept me in there for hours. Then he let me loose in a construction zone with a balloon tied to my tail. I just tried to run away from him and his bright red boots as fast as I could. Some men cornered me, put me in a box, and the next thing I know, I'm in this cage. Bright red boots? Whiskers had heard that before, from Bully, who also said he'd been taken by a stranger. Excuse me, I'll come back. Whiskers padded his way to the front of the kennel and found the new dog. Hi, I'm Whiskers, the dog interrupted. They told me you'd be coming by. I'm Butterscotch. But honestly, I don't feel much like talking right now. I just want to go back to my apartment. This is all a mistake. She turned around and sat down facing away from the cage door. Whiskers sighed. Most of the animals who showed up here said the same thing. It's just a mistake. They'll come back for me. I'm sure you're right. Whiskers didn't want to press the poor dog. She'd had a horrible day. He knew that much without hearing the details. But she'd been brought in by the same man who had delivered Bully and Tiger. He decided to ask a quick question. You didn't happen to see a man in red cowboy boots, did you? Butterscotch stood up and turned back around. That's the man who picked me up at the park. He must have thought I was his dog. When he realized he'd made a mistake, he let me out of his van in a parking lot. But I didn't know where I was, so I panicked and somebody caught me. The man who took you was driving a van? Butterscotch nodded. Yeah, one of those with the doors that open on the back. There was a picture of some zoo animal on the side. Bully had gotten into the back of a van when he was taken. Whiskers made a mental note to ask if he had seen anything on the side. Tiger probably didn't see a vehicle because she was inside a bag. But all three of them had seen red cowboy boots, and all three of them had been set free in strange places. Somebody was abducting animals, taking them away from home, and setting them free without any identification. Families were being torn apart like he had been from his family. Whiskers wanted to know why. More than that, he wanted to stop this person. Is everything okay, Fred? You've barely said a word since you got home. Fred finished the last bite of meatloaf. Is there any more of this? I never had time to eat the lunch you packed for me. I was busy investigating some thefts. Oh, that's wonderful. Not that you skipped lunch. You know how I feel about that. Sheila carried the meatloaf pan to the table and scooped a slice onto Fred's empty plate. But they let you do another investigation. You'll be a detective soon, I just know it. Fred grimaced. I wouldn't get too excited about it. I think Ronnie just wanted me out of the way at the museum. I saw his interview on TV with Kendall Quinn and looked for you in the background, but didn't see you. They should have interviewed you instead. Fred chose not to tell his wife about how the senior officer had taken the microphone away from him. He took a bite of the second meatloaf slice. Any word on your new friend? Sheila asked. Have his owners found him yet? Not yet, Fred answered with his mouth full. He finished chewing and swallowing before adding more detail. I was back at the shelter, though. That's what's bothering me. I had to drop off 2 more animals, a cat and a golden retriever. I think the crimes today are connected to the stolen bananas yesterday. Somebody is stealing pets and using them as distractions to steal other things. Oh, Fred. Sheila stopped cleaning the kitchen and walked over to hug her husband. That's horrible. I'm so sorry. You don't think... She let the unfinished sentence hang in the air. Fred shook his head. Not likely. If Sparky had been stolen by this guy, we would have found him by now. He's not coming home. We have to accept that. He sat quietly for a minute, comforted by Sheila's embrace. I'm not as hungry as I thought I was. He pushed the plate with the meatloaf away. Sheila let go of Fred and picked up the plate. I'll put this away so you can have it for lunch tomorrow. Thank you. It was delicious. Fred stood up from the table and walked quietly to the stairs. He didn't have much to go on, but he would organize his thoughts in his basement office. This pet thief needed to be stopped. Chapter 8. Leo and Chanel. Thursday. Leo stood in the front passenger seat, stretching his little Pomeranian legs to see out the car window. When the driver's door opened, he smelled the smoke. They were picking up barbecue. His family loved this restaurant. They got takeout from here once a week, like clockwork. "I'll just be a minute. Protect the car, Leo." The door slammed shut, and Leo moved to the driver's seat, ready to perform his duty. Anybody that tried to steal this car was in for trouble. Big trouble. Because Leo was a big, ferocious beast. At least in his mind. A shadow crossed the window, and Leo let out a series of loud barks. The shadow moved on. "That's right, buddy. Just keep moving." Another shadow, but this one lingered. Leo looked up at the man in the baseball cap staring in the window and barked. He barked like there was no tomorrow, but the man didn't get the message. Was he deaf or something? A woman appeared beside the man. "Is that your dog?" The man jumped, surprised by the woman. No, but it must be about to overheat. It was here when I went inside to eat, and it's still here with the sun beating down through the windshield." "That's not true," Leo barked. "I haven't even been here a minute." "Poor doggy." The woman looked distraught. "Do you think the owner is inside eating? How could they do that?" "It's terrible. They should be arrested. I tell you what, I've got water in my van. I'm going to bust out the window and take care of this little fella. You go inside and see if you can find the owner, okay? Tell them what I've done." The man lifted a hammer and swung hard, shattering the glass on the driver's side window. He pulled the dog out while the woman rushed to the restaurant. As soon as she walked in the door, he rushed to the van and drove away. "That cherry blossom bliss looks great on you, Chanel. I think we've found your new signature nail polish." The white-haired poodle stared at herself in one of many mirrors on the wall of the doggy salon. The salon attendant was correct. Her nails were gorgeous. "I wish somebody would pamper me the way your mommy does you. It must be a good life." "You don't know anything about my life," Chanel thought to herself. Her days may be full of luxury, but they could also be lonely. She spent more time with Lauren's assistant than Lauren herself. It took a lot of work and a lot of travel to keep the money rolling in. Was it worth it? Chanel couldn't say. She only knew that she spent too many nights alone, and the fancy bottled water in her doggy bowl didn't taste any better than the water in the toilet. "Can I help you?" The attendant was speaking to a man in a baseball cap at the front desk. "I'm here to pick up, Channel?" The man seemed nervous and read the name from his cell phone. "You mean Chanel? I'm sorry, but I don't know who you are." The attendant looked around for help, but all the other employees were busy. "Yeah, sorry about that. I'm Rebecca's boyfriend, Lauren's assistant. Rebecca was in a car accident, and I'm on my way to check on her, but she told me I had to pick up the dog first. She's worried Lauren will find out that she left Chanel here by herself. She's supposed to stay and wait. Can you please just let me take her so that I can get her home and go see my girlfriend at the hospital?" The attendant had never met Lauren, but she knew how touchy she could be when it came to the pampered poodle. Another girl had lost her job after clipping Chanel's nails too short. "Okay. I'm sorry about your girlfriend. I hope she's okay." Chanel didn't recall Rebecca having a boyfriend, but then she never really paid attention to what Lauren's assistant said. The girl was always yammering away about something. She went with the man to the parking lot. The van he drove certainly wasn't up to her standards, but what's a girl to do? As long as the cheap carpet didn't ruin her fresh nail polish, everything would be okay. Chapter 9. Cheese and Pepperoni. "Thanks for the tip." The pizza delivery driver carried the empty, insulated bag back toward his car, parked on the street in front of his customer's house. He heard the dog barking, but didn't pay attention at first. Once he realized the barking was coming from inside his car, he set down the delivery bag and looked in through the window, spotting the small Pomeranian in his driver's seat. "Where did you come from?" He looked around for the dog's owner, but didn't see anyone. "Sorry, little guy. I've got to get back for more deliveries, and you can't ride with me." He opened the door and reached in, but the dog dodged him, jumping into the back seat and still yapping. The delivery guy crawled inside after the dog. While he tried to corner the small dog, a man in red cowboy boots crept around from behind the car, picked up the pizza bag, snatched the magnetic sign from the roof of the car, and walked to a van parked a couple of spaces away. By the time the delivery driver caught the dog, the van was 2 blocks away. "You should have known better than to pay a psychic to give you lottery numbers. If she knew the winning numbers, she wouldn't be staring at your greasy palm in a 20-year-old RV. The young man yelling at the television wore only a pair of shorts and tennis shoes with no socks. He picked the remote up from the chair beside him and changed channels on the television. "Am I right? These TV judge shows are ridiculous." He looked at the only other laundromat customer for confirmation, a man in jeans, a t-shirt, a baseball cap, and red cowboy boots. The other man grabbed a pair of crutches from against the wall and struggled out of his seat. "You're not wrong," he said. Placing a crutch under each armpit, he slowly made his way to the door. The young man stood up and rushed past to open the door. "Thanks. Doc says I can get rid of these in a couple of weeks." The man on crutches stepped out to the back of the van parked right outside the door. He opened one of the van doors and fell over as a large poodle pushed its way out and ran away. "You okay?" The fallen man pointed with one of his crutches. "My baby! Get my baby!" When the younger man took off running, the fallen man stood up, tossed his crutches aside, walked back into the laundromat, and pulled some still damp clothes from a dryer. Selecting a pizza delivery uniform, he dropped the other items, walked out to the van, and drove away. Chapter 10. Pineapple Pizza. "He'll be there in 30 minutes or less." Ronnie smirked as he looked at Fred and touched the phone screen to disconnect his call. "Another chance for you to practice your detective skills. And you can bring us back some pizzas. The food at this museum is older than the exhibits." "Italian sausage and bell peppers," Brian said. Grady chimed in as well. "Ham and pineapple." Barney pointed 2 fingers down his throat. "Nasty. Don't you dare bring a pizza in here with pineapple. Get a meat lovers." Fred didn't write down his colleague's orders, but he did keep Ronnie's promise and pulled up at Presto Pizzeria less than 30 minutes later. A young man in a delivery uniform that didn't fit him rushed out the door carrying a delivery bag. An older man inside yelled at him, "Get back here as fast as you can! This cop needs to ask you some questions." The older man glanced at Fred, then added, "But don't speed." Fred started to introduce himself, but the manager held up a finger and answered the store telephone. "Presto! Your pizza wish is about to be granted. What can I get cooking for you?" Fred took in a deep breath. The pizza smelled good, and he was suddenly hungry. His wife, Sheila, had packed him a lunch, but fresh pizza always beat leftover meatloaf. "Either I'm being targeted, or I have the lousiest employees in the world." The manager was off the phone now and speaking to Fred. "First, Tyler comes in without a uniform. Says he got stolen out of the dryer at the laundromat. While I'm calling him a liar, Brandon pulls in with no sign on his car roof and no delivery bag. Is this some kind of gang initiation or something? Pick on the pizza guy? I bet it's those idiots at Guido's. Can't handle a little competition." Fred pulled out his notepad. "Any description of the people that did it?" The manager yelled back at a young man loading a large pizza into a box. "Brandon, did you see anybody?" The kid closed the pizza box and carried it to the front counter. Fred eyed it hungrily, and his stomach growled. "Just a dog. It's still in my car. The people at the house said they'd never seen it before." Fred pulled his gaze away from the pizza box and looked at Brandon. "A dog, you say?" The manager interrupted. "Tyler came in with a dog, too. Tried to tell me it lured him away from the laundromat. I thought it was the worst excuse I'd ever heard for losing a uniform, till Brandon shows up with his story." Fred wrote down the details from Brandon, then waited for Tyler to return to get his story firsthand. When he put his notepad back in his shirt pocket, he pulled out his wallet. "How much to deliver a pizza to the museum?" "Just cheese, sauce, and lots of pineapple." Allison's face lit up when she walked out of the rescue office and smelled the pizza Fred was carrying. "Who wants a treat?" Fred asked. Allison reached out for the pizza, but Fred pulled it away. "I was talking to the animals," he joked. Allison grabbed the pizza box anyway. "Leave the jokes to me. Come on in. I've got napkins and plates." "What about these two?" Fred pointed to the back of his car where the Pomeranian and the poodle pushed their noses against the glass window. "Seriously? Okay, bring them inside. But we'll eat first." Carrying the Pomeranian and holding the lead of the poodle, Fred followed Allison into the office. Allison set down a couple of bowls of dog food on opposite ends of the room, so the humans could eat their pizza without the stare of begging puppy eyes. After Allison had devoured 2 slices, she asked about the dogs. "Are these 2 from our same perp?" "It looks that way," Fred answered, wiping sauce from his cheek. "Abandoned at the sites of 2 more petty crimes." "Bananas again?" Fred pointed at the pizza box. "Pizza. Well, pizza restaurant stuff. A delivery box, a magnetic sign for the delivery driver's car, and a store uniform." "Sounds like our criminal mastermind plans to impersonate a pizza guy for his next big heist." Allison was playing detective now. "Anybody expecting a delivery could be his next target." A disturbing thought popped into Fred's head. "The Queen's crown. I need to call Ronnie." He wiped his hands and pulled his phone from his pocket, selecting Ronnie from his contacts. Ronnie answered immediately. "Ha ha, very funny, Fred. Grady's pigging out and the rest of us are all starving, having to smell that pizza but knowing it's covered in pineapple. Enjoy your laugh, because you're going to pay for this one." "Ronnie, is the driver still there?" Fred asked in a rushed, almost desperate tone. "You expect me to tip her for you? For a pineapple pizza? Not going to happen. But she's gone already." "It was a woman?" Fred's voice was calmer, less anxious. "Girl. But yeah. What do you care?" Now Ronnie was starting to sound worried. Fred wasn't sure how to explain. If he tried to convince his senior officer that these piddling crimes were part of some master plan, he might blow his chances of ever becoming a detective. He'd certainly get teased about it. "I just think that whoever stole the items from the pizza store might be trying to sneak their way into someplace, like the museum." He tried not to sound too dramatic. It was a big leap from a pizza delivery box to a priceless crown. Ronnie laughed. "Don't worry, wannabe Detective Mason. You take care of the pizza place, and we'll take care of the jewels." He disconnected the call. Allison was staring at Fred. "You think whoever is abducting these poor animals might be going after the Queen's crown? I saw that on TV. The police officer they interviewed said they had all their best people protecting it. It would be crazy to try to steal it." Fred nodded. "Bananas, even." Allison chuckled. "Okay, that was pretty bad, but it made me laugh. So a point for you." She closed the pizza box with 2 slices still inside. "If you're right, though, it would at least mean that they should stop stealing people's pets. The play is tomorrow, and the Crown will be leaving soon." "Good point. Maybe you won't have to expand the rescue." "We could always use more room." Allison sighed. You want to help me check these two for chips?" "Sure." Fred knelt and pulled the Pomeranian from under the desk where it was hiding. The dog started barking like crazy. Allison walked back over with the scanner. It didn't take long to scan the small dog. There was no active chip. Fred set the yappy dog down and walked to the poodle. "Nice nails," Allison said. Fred grinned. "Thanks. I just got a manicure." Allison didn't laugh. "I think we can retire that bit now. But I do want to know what that nail polish is." She put the scanner near the poodle's neck, and it immediately beeped. "Bingo!" She carried the scanner to her desk and entered the number from the screen into her computer. "It's a local number and address. We may be in luck this time." Fred got out his notepad. "And finding the owner might give me my best clue yet for catching this guy." Allison was already dialing the phone number. Her face dropped when the call went straight to voicemail. "Hi, this is Allison at For the Love of Animals Rescue. I think we have your poodle here. Could you please give me a call back as soon as possible?" She left the number for the rescue and touched her screen to end the call. Fred put his notepad back in his shirt pocket. "If you don't mind, I'll hang around to see if they call back." "Sure. You can help me take pictures." Whiskers waited impatiently outside the door to the rescue office. He'd seen the policeman arrive again with 2 more dogs. 2 more pets taken from their families by the man in the van, most likely. He was anxious to speak to them and get their stories, but Allison and the policeman were too busy eating pizza. Eventually, the door opened. Whiskers fell in line while Allison led the way, carrying the Pomeranian around the cages and back to the play area. The police officer led the poodle, who walked nervously behind him, just close enough to avoid being tugged by the lead attached to the collar Allison had placed on her. "Hi, I'm Whiskers. Don't be too worried. This is a pretty nice place. They're taking you to the play area for some pictures. You'll get to choose a toy from the basket." The poodle didn't reply or look at Whiskers. She stayed focused on the man holding her lead and did her best not to make eye contact with any of the animals they walked past. Bones made that difficult. "Ooh, welcome, pretty lady. Look at that nail polish. You must be fancy. Be sure to tell them you want the penthouse cage." A few of the other dogs laughed. The poodle couldn't help but look to see who was saying these things. "Ignore him," Whiskers meowed. "Bones tries to get under everybody's fur, but he's just a big puppy. What's your name?" "Chanel," the poodle finally answered. "They can't keep me here. My human will be looking for me." She didn't sound too confident about that. Whiskers reassured her. "I'm sure you're right. Can you tell me how you ended up here? Was there a man in a van involved, wearing red cowboy boots?" Chanel stopped moving, causing Fred to accidentally jerk her lead. "Come on, almost there. You'll like the play area." Chanel started walking again, but looked over at Whiskers. "How did you know that? Do you work with him?" "Oh, no." Whiskers was stung by the accusation, but eager to find out more. "I'm trying to convince this policeman to lock him up, whoever he is. He's already kidnapped at least 5 pets, including the 2 of you. Did you notice anything else about him? Or his van? I noticed the carpet had never been cleaned. He's lucky it didn't ruin my pedicure. And there was some picture on the side, one of those horses with the long necks." Whiskers was confused. "A horse with a long neck?" They had reached the play area, and the policeman let go of Chanel's lead. Allison pointed out the basket of toys and told Fred to empty it onto the grass. Chanel scurried away to the far corner of the fenced-in area, but the Pomeranian jumped into the toys, grabbing hold of a lion plush toy. "I'll show you who the king of the jungle is," he barked as he slung the toy around. He was working out some frustration. Allison snapped pictures and encouraged the small dog to keep it up. Whiskers stood at the edge of the grass, watching the policeman and wondering how he could convince him to find and arrest the man who was abducting pets. He'd tried to talk to the officer on his last visit, but he hadn't understood. He had thought Whiskers wanted a belly rub, Belly rubs. Whiskers hadn't had one of those since he got lost and wandered away from his family. People at the rescue had tried to pick him up, but Whiskers wouldn't let them. He wanted a belly rub from his family. His imagination carried him back to the kitchen of his old house, sitting in the lady's lap with warm sun shining in through the windows. Her gentle fingers had felt like magic, and he had rolled over on his back, encouraging her to continue. Soft music played in his head. A high-pitched bark pulled Whiskers out of his daydream. The Pomeranian wasn't happy that Allison had taken the plush lion away. She wanted him to play with a different toy now. She set a dump truck in front of him. The dog wasn't interested. Same with the convertible. Then she tried a white van. That drew a response, but probably not the one she had hoped for. The Pomeranian ran away. "That's okay. I got some good pictures," Allison said. "Fred, think you can get the poodle to come pose for me? This should be easy. She looks like she's used to having her picture taken." Suddenly, Whiskers realized why the Pomeranian had run away. "The van," he meowed to himself. "It reminds him of being dog-napped. I wonder if—" Whiskers ran to the toy, picked it up in his mouth, and carried it to the policeman, who was gently trying to coax Chanel back to where Allison stood with her camera. Whiskers bumped the van against the man's ankle. The policeman looked down at Whiskers and shook his head. "I told you yesterday, I'm a dog person." He turned back to Chanel, who looked at Whiskers with a pleading expression, asking silently for help. Whiskers nudged the toy van against the policeman's ankle again. The man ignored him while reaching down to grab hold of Chanel's lead. "I told you no. I've got to help Allison get these pictures." The policeman led Chanel back to where Allison waited. Whiskers followed them, still carrying the van in his mouth. He approached the Pomeranian. "Don't bring that near me," the small dog barked, glaring at Whiskers threateningly. Whiskers set the van down. "Sorry. Were you taken by someone driving a van like this?" When the dog didn't answer, Whiskers introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Whiskers. Several animals here were stolen from their families by a man in a van. I'm trying to help the police catch him. Did you see a man wearing red boots, driving a white van with a horse on the side?" "It wasn't a horse," the Pomeranian finally answered. "It was a giraffe." That made more sense than a horse with a long neck. Whiskers suddenly had an idea. He took off quickly toward the toys. "Where is it?" he meowed to himself, nudging away the lion and other stuffed animals. "I know there was a giraffe in here." He was still looking when Allison finished her picture taking, and she and the policeman led the newest residents of the rescue to their cages. "You're not going to find it there." The voice came from one of the cages behind Whiskers. He turned around to see Patches staring at him from the cage Allison had moved her to the previous day. "Did they throw it away?" Whiskers asked, walking up beside the cage. Patches shook her head. "Bones has it. He wouldn't let it go when he found it, so they let him take it back to his cage. He doesn't want anybody to know. He keeps it hidden in there." Whiskers grinned like the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. "I knew he was a softy." He took off running toward the front cages. The policeman was standing at the kennel door, saying goodbye to Allison. "Bones, I need the giraffe," Whiskers said loudly as he reached the big pit bull's cage. "Give me the giraffe." Bones glared at Whiskers menacingly. The animals in the surrounding cages watched the showdown between the fearsome dog and the much smaller cat. Whiskers didn't flinch. "Come on, I know you've got it. I need it now before the policeman." Bones growled. "Mr. Twiggy's not going anywhere." The clinking of the kennel door closing told Whiskers it was too late. He turned to see the policeman walk to his car, get in, and drive away. Chapter 11. Sparky. Sheila turned on the dishwasher and walked into the den, where she saw Fred staring at a framed picture on the wall. It was the picture from the flyer he'd seen at the rescue. "Sparky was a good boy," Sheila said quietly. "The bestest boy," Fred replied. "Remember how he would scare himself when he passed gas?" Sheila snorted. "He'd jump down from the bed or the sofa and leave us to enjoy it. Oh, it was awful. But I still have trouble getting to sleep without him there beside us." "Between us, you mean? I told him we were married and didn't need a chaperone anymore, but he didn't listen. He was just like his daddy." Sheila poked Fred's side. Fred laughed, took Sheila's hand, and led her to the sofa. "You're not going to work in the basement tonight?" "I thought we could cuddle up here and watch one of your mystery shows together." Fred plopped down on the sofa. "I'd like that." Sheila smiled and sat down beside her husband, resting her head on his chest. It was several minutes before Fred leaned out and picked up the remote control from the coffee table. He turned on the TV and immediately tried to change channels before Sheila noticed that Sophie Thorson's image was on the screen. Too late. "You can watch your girlfriend," Sheila teased. "They're saying she'll be arriving tomorrow. I bet there will be a crowd at the airport. Will you be guarding her, too?" "I might be. We're supposed to send somebody to pick her up and escort her to the hotel." Sheila sat straight up and stared directly at Fred. "Frederick Thomas Mason, are you just now telling me that you might be taking Sophie Thorson to a hotel?" It's just, it wouldn't be like that. I won't be." Sheila tried to keep a straight face, but Fred's stumbling forced her to laugh. "Well, you'd better get a picture if you do. And I'll be checking your collar for lipstick." Chapter 12. Snakes and Monkeys. Friday. 24 sixth-grade boys and girls sat with mouths wide open in a semicircle on a school playground. Their teacher stood behind them, making sure everyone stayed seated while a man in front allowed Slinky, a large snake, to coil around his arm and over his neck. "Does anyone know what kind of snake this is?" the man asked. Several arms shot up. The man pointed to a girl in the front row. "A big one," the girl said. All of the kids laughed. Slinky didn't think it was funny. She didn't consider herself to be big. "Well, we do have some that are much larger," the man replied. "And this young lady will keep growing. She's a ball python, also known as a royal python. We call her Slinky. Who wants to hold her?" This time, only one boy raised his hand. The man motioned for the boy to come up to the front. But as the boy looked back to make sure it was okay with the teacher, he noticed another man approaching with a large, insulated pizza delivery bag. "Pizza!" the boy screamed. The kids jumped up and swarmed the delivery man. The teacher tried to intervene, but the man wearing a pizza delivery uniform had already pulled out his pizzas, and the kids were helping themselves. Slinky sighed. She enjoyed meeting the children. It was always a treat when Walter brought her out to show her off. While the teacher attempted to regain control, Walter set Slinky back inside the plexiglass box he'd brought her in. Slithering around to fit herself in comfortably, she spotted a pair of red cowboy boots approaching. "Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt your show." "It's all right. I saved the snake for last, so I was just wrapping up anyway. Got to get these fellas back to the zoo." He picked up a couple of smaller plexiglass boxes with a turtle and a ferret, then started carrying them toward an enclosed trailer connected to a pickup truck. "Let me give you a hand," the man in the boots said. He picked up Slinky's box and followed behind. When Walter walked inside the trailer, the second man closed the trailer door and pulled down the latch. With Walter trapped inside, the other man stepped to the cab of the truck, reached inside, and pulled out a garage door opener. The kids and teacher were too busy with pizza to hear Walter banging away inside the trailer. After setting Slinky down in the back of his van, the man in the boots stepped into the driver's seat and left the school. A few minutes later, the van arrived at a familiar place. They pulled up to the back entrance to the zoo. With a click of the garage door opener, the security gate slid open, and the van pulled in unnoticed. The driver parked it discreetly between two utility sheds, changed into an official-looking shirt Slinky recognized as one they sold in the zoo gift shop, then retrieved her and the pizza delivery case, which he carried through an unlocked gate onto a path between animal habitats. Past the lion habitat, the zebras, the giraffes, and the aviary building full of exotic birds, the man strolled casually to where a zoo employee was preparing to feed some monkeys. Salvador was salivating. It was time to eat, and Johnny, his favorite zoo employee, had shown up with a bucket of carrots. Not his favorite meal. Salvador preferred fruit over vegetables, but the zoo made sure he and the rest of the emperor tamarins got a good variety. Nearby, Salvador noticed a man he hadn't seen before. Wait, that wasn't right. He had seen the man before. He recognized the red cowboy boots, but the man wearing them had never been back in this part of the zoo before. He had visited several times, but stayed where the rest of the visitors watched. The man in the red boots had stopped and seemed to be waiting for something. Just as Johnny turned his key on the door to the monkey enclosure, the man turned a clear box over on its side and yelled, "Snake! A snake got loose!" Then the man ducked into the shadow of a building. A woman screamed. A group of teenagers who had been watching some iguanas took off running away. Johnny dropped his bucket and ran past the man on his way to help recapture the escaped snake, not noticing there was anyone else on the path. The man in the red boots emerged from the shadows, carrying a pizza delivery case to the door Johnny had just unlocked. It was closed, but opened easily. The man opened the front flap of his pizza bag, threw a banana inside, and set it down in the door. A banana? Now that was more like it. But there was only one, and Salvador knew he'd better hurry, or one of the others would get it. Swinging down from a low tree branch, he practically flew into the bag. The next thing he knew, it was completely dark. He could feel himself moving quickly away from the monkey habitat, tossed around inside the soft bag, with no idea what was happening. Chapter 13. Chasing a Monkey's Tail. Did I ever mention that I used to drive musicians around when they came to town for concerts? My Uncle Julius was a promoter, and he— Yes, Grady. You've managed to tell us all about that at least half a dozen times this week. Ronnie glared at his junior officer. It doesn't mean you'll get to pick up Sophie Thorson. I'm just saying I've got experience driving celebrities. Nobody else here does. Ronnie rolled his eyes. You've also got at least 2 bottles of aftershave on you today. I'm tempted to send you just so I don't have to smell it anymore. But I won't do that to the poor lady. The regular crew of officers was gathered in the museum, standing guard over the Queen's crown for one final day on display before it would be taken to the park for the play. I guess it's time to decide who the lucky fella is going to be. Ronnie held his left hand out with 4 straws poking out of his clenched fist. Whoever draws the shortest straw is on diva duty. Grady reached out quickly, but Ronnie pulled his hand away. Not you, lover boy. Barney and Brian each pulled a straw and compared them. They were the same length. Everybody looked at Fred. He reluctantly reached out and took one of the 2 remaining straws. It was half as long as the others. Ronnie tossed him a set of keys and grinned. Take the unmarked SUV. I had it cleaned up real nice this morning. It's got tinted windows and a big back seat, so good luck. Fred's bright red cheeks only encouraged his fellow officers. Don't get too excited, Romeo. She's here for the crown, not the clown. Brian laughed. Good one, Barney. Fred, be careful to not get any red carpet burns. Grady pouted quietly in a corner. Ronnie waved his hands at Fred in a shooing motion. Go on, don't leave the lady waiting. Fred looked at the keys in his hand, then slowly walked toward and out of the museum exit. He clicked the fob to unlock the SUV doors and was reaching for the handle when Ronnie called to him from behind. Hang on, Fred. Change of plans. Somebody stole a snake and locked a zoo employee in his trailer. Head over to the school and get in some more detective practice. I'll take care of Miss Thorson." Ronnie wore a big grin as he took the keys back from Fred. Fred walked to his patrol car and got in. He breathed a big sigh of relief, knowing that he would avoid more teasing from the guys. And from Sheila. Meeting a famous movie star would have been nice, though. He'd probably never get another chance. On his way to the school, his mind wandered. He imagined himself as the hero in one of Sophie's films, kissing her passionately from a high viewpoint as the sun set over the Mediterranean. Honk! The driver of the car behind him let Fred know that the light had changed to green. He turned left into the school parking lot. Before he could get parked, though, his phone rang. The caller ID said, Ronnie. Fred pulled into the nearest empty space and answered. "I just got here. I haven't even gotten out of my car." "Well, don't. The snake found its way home to the zoo. But now a monkey is missing. Get there ASAP and see if you can catch this weirdo before he gets away again." "Shouldn't I?" The call ended. Fred backed out of the parking space, gave an apologetic wave to the teacher walking out to greet him, and drove toward the zoo. Finding a parking spot at the zoo was easy. Most of the visitors had apparently decided that watching animals, especially snakes, was more fun from a safe distance, with a fence or solid piece of glass in between. Fred wasn't pleased to see most of his potential witnesses and suspects had gone. He started to say something about it to the zoo director, but the woman was having a bad day, so he chose not to add to her frustrations. "Did anyone see a person set the snake loose or take the monkey from its enclosure?" "If they did, they haven't told me. All anybody wants to talk to me about is how close the snake came to them and their children, which wasn't as close as they said. I've got it all on video." Fred perked up. "You do? Show it to me, please." "I mean, not all of it. Just the part where the snake is loose in the guest areas. Our CCTV doesn't show the employee-only sections. It looks like the snake crawled out from behind the fence separating guests from an employee walkway between enclosures." Fred sighed. "Oh, and the parking areas," the zoo director stated. "Excuse me?" "Cameras. We have a couple in the parking areas. The employee parking in the rear has access to the walkway." "I'd like to see that video, please." The director led Fred to her office and pulled up the CCTV footage on her computer. "I'll leave you to it if that's okay. I've got a lot to deal with." She walked out the door without giving Fred a chance to object. Fred clicked play on the video labeled Employee Gate with the current date. The camera showed a gated entrance from the street into employee parking, lit up by a street lamp. The video started at midnight. He fast-forwarded until vehicles started arriving shortly before 6 a.m. There was a steady stream of cars and trucks pulling up to the gate, which appeared to slide open automatically for them. Too many for Fred to look closer at each one. Fred thought for a moment. It had been about 11:30 a.m. when Ronnie told him to go to the school. The snake couldn't have been taken before 11 a.m. Pulling his phone out, Fred looked at his list of calls. Ronnie's call sending him to the zoo came in at 11:42 a.m. Whoever stole the snake and set it loose at the zoo must have arrived sometime between 11 a.m. and 11:42 a.m. He fast-forwarded again. Not nearly as many cars coming in after 11 a.m., but a few employees heading out for lunch or other errands. 3 vehicles entered in the limited time frame, none of which looked out of place for a zoo. A sedan, a truck with landscaping tools in the bed, and a white cargo van with a giraffe on the side. The zoo director poked her head back in the office door. "See anything suspicious?" Fred shook his head. "Can I get a copy of this and the other camera views to look at later?" "Of course." She hurried over to the computer, clicked an email icon, and dragged several files into a message. "Just type your address in and hit send. I've got to run. The TV station is here, and I need to make sure they don't interview the wrong staff members. Let yourself out?" It was a question, but she didn't wait for an answer. Chapter 14. Primetime News. Sheila picked up the television remote and turned up the volume. "Fred, they're talking about your case." She heard stairs creaking and the door to the basement open. Fred hurried over and sat beside her on the sofa. Kendall Quinn was reporting live from the zoo. That's 2 animal-related crimes in one day. My source inside the department tells me, off the record, that there have been others earlier in the week. Fred, you didn't... Of course not. Fred kept his eyes on the television. Police believe the cases may be related, but they didn't tell me why someone would be abducting animals. Sheila waited until the live report was finished before speaking up again. Do you know why they're doing it, Fred? Whoever it is? Just that they seem to always use the animals as a distraction for their next crime. They only kept the snake for about half an hour before setting it loose at the zoo and grabbing Salvador. Salvador? That's the monkey's name. So the big question now is, what are they going to use Salvador for? And when and where? Sheila looked carefully at Fred. After all the years they'd been married, she knew when he wasn't telling the whole story. You have a theory, don't you? Fred nodded slowly. They don't keep the animals long, so it will probably happen within 24 hours. They've been getting progressively bolder. It's one thing to snatch up a cat or a pizza uniform. Abducting a monkey from a zoo in broad daylight is a big escalation. Whatever they have planned next might be even bigger. A lot bigger. Fred stopped talking and allowed Sheila to think it over. Eventually, her eyes widened. The play is tomorrow. Most of your department will be at the park watching out for the crown. The rest of the city will be unprotected. Right, Fred nodded. Either they're timing their big event while our attention is focused on the park, or they wouldn't try to steal the crown. With thousands of people watching and most of the police department providing security? It would be bold, that's for sure. Fred and Sheila sat quietly on the sofa, wondering what the next day might bring, until Sheila noticed the television again. Is that Ronnie? Fred's supervising officer was on the screen, opening the back door of a black SUV. Sophie Thorson stepped out, wearing very high heels and an even lower-cut red dress. Reporters pointed microphones at her face, while a crowd of fans screamed in the background. Sophie! One of the reporters got her attention. Are you enjoying yourself in our city so far? The famous actress put an arm around Ronnie and pulled him close. With a protection detail like this, hunky man, what do you think? She kissed the embarrassed officer on his cheek and smiled mischievously. Ronnie looked like he might faint. The bright red lipstick practically glowed on his ghost-white cheek. Sheila turned to Fred. You'd better be glad they didn't send you to escort her. Fred, with the wisdom that comes from decades of police work and married life, said nothing. Chapter 15. Reunion. Saturday. Okay, boys, this is it. Fred listened carefully in the museum display room as Ronnie went over the final instructions for transporting the Queen's crown to the park. Grady rolled his eyes. He hadn't spoken a word to Ronnie since seeing Sophie Thorson on the news, kissing the senior officer on the cheek. I saw that, Grady. Whatever your problem is, get over it. If anybody's going to make a play for this crown, it'll be while it's in transport. Once it's at the park, they'd be crazy to try anything in front of the whole world. So I need everybody on top of their game for the next half hour. Will you be personally placing it on your girlfriend's head? Grady muttered under his breath. What's that? Care to speak up, Grady? Brian laughed. I think somebody's a little jealous about the kiss you got yesterday. It was completely unprofessional. Grady glared at Brian. It was Ronnie's turn to roll his eyes. She kissed me, which I'm sure you saw clearly as you watched the news story over and over, wishing it had been you. Trust me, it wouldn't have been, even if I had let you drive her. She would have passed out from the toxic fumes you were wearing. Fred stepped between the two men as they poked out their chests. Everybody calm down. You can fight it out after the crown and Sophie Thorson are gone. We've got a job to do. An awkward silence followed, broken up by the sound of Fred's phone ringing. He excused himself and answered in the museum hallway. "Is this Fred?" "It is. Who's this?" "Allison, from the pet rescue. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from the flyer on the wall." Fred hadn't realized that Allison had seen him looking at the old flyer and realized it was his. "You haven't found—" He couldn't even bring himself to say Sparky's name. No, sorry. But I do have some good news. Chanel, the poodle you brought in, is going home. Her owner just called me back, and she's on her way. I thought you might like to ask her a few questions. See if she can help you find whoever is taking pets." Fred bit his lower lip. He did want to speak to Chanel's owner, but he also needed to help protect the crown. His mind raced through the possibilities. "Fred, are you still there?" "I am. I'm on my way. She might have the information I need to catch this guy before he strikes again." "On your way where?" Ronnie had stepped into the hall, wondering why Fred was holding up their mission. "The only place you're going right now is to the park with the rest of us." Fred disconnected the call. "You've got more than enough people on protection duty." He debated whether or not to tell Ronnie what he was thinking. What would he say? "I think there is a threat to the crown, and I can stop it by talking to some lady whose poodle was taken." No, he better keep that to himself. "I've only got one chance to talk to a witness who might be able to help me stop all of these animals from being stolen. I think the culprit is going to strike again today." Try to steal the crown, he thought to himself. "Are you that scared of being near Sophie Thorson, Fred? Afraid she might kiss you too? It's not that bad, honestly. But fine, go do your wannabe detective stuff." Ronnie turned and plodded back into the display room. Fred rushed to his car. Whiskers came running up to the front row of cages, carrying a red shoe in his mouth. He dropped the shoe in front of a pit bull's cage so that he could speak. "Bones, I need it, now." Bones looked at the cat suspiciously. "What do you need?" "The giraffe toy. Hurry." "I told you before, Mr. Twiggy's not going anywhere." Whiskers took a hurried look at the parking lot, where a police car had just pulled up and parked beside a fancy red two-seater convertible. The policeman was getting out. "I don't have any time for this. If you don't want this place to get even more crowded with more animals stolen from their families, then you need to get that giraffe, Mr. Twiggy, out here by the time I get back." Whiskers raced back the way he had come. At the back of the rescue, he found the basket full of toys and leaped inside. He emerged seconds later with the white van he had tried previously to show the policeman. Carrying it in his mouth, he ran back to the front of the enclosed area. Sitting on the concrete beside the red shoe he had left was a small stuffed giraffe. "Thank you, Bones." The policeman was inside the rescue office now, writing in a notepad and talking to Allison and the woman who had arrived in the convertible. Chanel was beside the woman, looking happy. Whiskers carried the giraffe to the glass door separating the office from the kennel. He held the giraffe up high in his mouth, but the policeman didn't look his way. He knocked on the door with the toy, barely making a sound. Bones growled his disapproval. Setting the plush toy down, Whiskers went back and retrieved the red shoe. He banged it against the door. That made just enough noise to draw an irritated look from Allison. Whiskers set the shoe next to Mr. Twiggy and went back again for the white van. Holding it firmly in his mouth, he banged it against the glass door. Everyone in the office heard the noise this time. The policeman and the woman holding Chanel's lead both turned to see where it was coming from. Allison walked to the door, opened it, grabbed the toys, and took them inside. She glared at Whiskers and blocked him from squeezing into the office as she closed the door. Whiskers saw the policeman glance at the toys for just a moment before returning his attention to the woman and his notepad. A low growl behind him told Whiskers how unhappy Bones was. Mr. Twiggy was locked away, and Whiskers hadn't accomplished anything. Humans can be so hard-headed. The policeman closed his notepad and put it in his pocket. He opened the front office door and held it as Chanel and the woman walked out. The dogs in the front row of cages howled their goodbyes, congratulating Chanel on being reunited with her human. It made them all feel better to see a happy ending. All except Bones. He stared angrily through the glass side door, trying to catch a glimpse of Mr. Twiggy and avoiding looking at Whiskers. The convertible backed up, turned, and kicked up a little gravel as it sped away with Chanel in the passenger seat, the wind blowing her hair and ears. The policeman opened his car door. "I'm sorry she wasn't much help," Allison said, standing in the open office door. The policeman stood beside his car. Whiskers glanced back at Bones, who still wouldn't look at him. He saw Bully in the next cage, staring out sadly at the man who had brought him here a few days before. Whiskers made a decision. Leaping from the concrete onto the front of the cages, Whiskers climbed the cage doors lined up against the outside of the office wall. When he reached the top, he swung his body sideways a few times, back and forth, gaining momentum, then launched himself, spinning over the overhang and onto the roof. The dogs went crazy, barking, howling, and cheering him on for his feat of athleticism. Allison, curious about the ruckus, stepped out the door and walked in front of the fence, trying to see what was causing the chaos. The policeman was also watching the cages. He never noticed the black and white cat hop down from the roof onto a dumpster, then to the ground, and pad its way silently behind the officer and into the car through the open door. "I've got to get back, Allison. Thanks for calling me." The policeman started his car, backed up, and drove off. Whiskers, looking through the back window, watched his awestruck friends fade away into the distance. Chapter 16. Madness. Though this be madness, yet there is method in it. "There you are! Get in place! Hurry!" Ronnie pointed Fred toward the stage, where Kendall Quinn, the TV reporter, was welcoming the large crowd gathered in the park. In the brick-covered space in front of the stage, several rows of white folding chairs were filled with attendees in tuxedos and ball gowns. Scattered throughout the grassy areas, families and couples in more casual attire were sitting on blankets and camping chairs of all colors and sizes. "You didn't come here to listen to Much Ado About Nothing." Kendall waited as a few people laughed and several more groaned at her reference to a different Shakespeare play. "Please enjoy today's special performance of Hamlet." The crowd cheered briefly, then went quiet as a lone guard walked out and took his place on the stage. Fred also took his place near the corner of the stage, guarding the crown that would soon make its appearance on Queen Gertrude's head in Scene 2. He allowed himself a brief moment to appreciate that it would actually be Sophie Thorson's head, and the beautiful actress would be only a few feet away. Sheila was right. Fred did have a thing for her. Nothing he would ever act on, of course, even if he had the chance. But he had always enjoyed her movies, even the ones that weren't very good. With a quick shake of his head, Fred refocused himself and looked out at the crowd. He scanned the area for anyone wearing red cowboy boots. Whiskers watched the opening of the play from the edge of the park. The policeman had never noticed him in the back of the car. Getting out was a bit hair-raising. The man was in a hurry and slammed the door shut quickly, almost catching Whiskers' tail in the process. Another hazard had presented itself in the park. Many of the families had brought dogs and other pets with them. Whiskers liked dogs, for the most part, but he liked them in their cages, at least until he got to know them. Strutting through the middle of the park would not be the safest way to look for the man who had been abducting animals. But with so many animals in the park, the man could very well be near, looking to nab another victim while their owner was distracted. What Whiskers didn't see inside the park was vehicles, and thanks to his new friends back at the rescue, he had a better description of the culprit's van than of his face or body. He decided to walk the perimeter and explore parking areas nearby. "The time is out of joint. O cursed spite, that ever I was born to set it right." The lead actor walked off the stage, leaving it empty. The crowd applauded. Act 1 was finished, and Kendall Quinn announced that there would be a short intermission. People stood up to stretch their legs or visit the restrooms. Fred looked around nervously. Too many people moving in too many directions. He couldn't watch everyone, but he could make sure that nobody from the audience went past him to backstage where the crown was. It had looked even more spectacular on stage than in the museum, and not only because it was on Sophie Thorson's head. Something about seeing that many fine jewels and precious metals floating around in such a public space. The crowd had been so excited when they first saw it that the actors had to pause their performance for a long moment. Sophie had stood like a statue, a radiant, beautiful statue, almost close enough for Fred to reach out and touch her. He shook his head again and looked behind to make sure nobody got past while he was daydreaming. So far, so good. The crown had made it to the park okay. It had been paraded on stage without any trouble. In just a couple of hours, it would be leaving town and no longer any concern of his. Maybe his theory was bananas. He was glad he hadn't said anything about it to Ronnie. "Banana?" A young woman held out a banana, offering it to Fred. He looked around and saw several people from the audience holding them. "It's free. Somebody donated them to hand out during the break." Fred was a little hungry. He took the slightly overripe banana and thanked the woman as she walked off with her nearly empty basket. Kendall Quinn's voice came over the loudspeakers. "Please take your seats. Act 2 is about to begin." Everyone rushed back to their seats. Fred, not wanting to eat his banana while standing beside the stage, stuck it in his back pocket for later. Whiskers had made his way to the back of the park, behind where the performance was happening. That area was barricaded and protected by several police officers. He probably could have snuck in, he thought, past the one officer who was staring at the actors instead of watching for trouble. "Grady, stop drooling over Sophie and keep your eyes on your job." The officer quickly turned his head back around. That was fine. The van wouldn't be back there anyway. Whiskers stepped back in the shadows and padded further behind the protected area. And there it was. Directly behind the stage, and about 100 yards past the barricaded zone, a white cargo van was parked on the street, facing away from the park. On the side of the van, there was a large picture of a giraffe. Above the giraffe was the name of a company, Heads Up Security. Their slogan was below the picture, "We'll stick our neck out for you." He'd done it. Whiskers had found the man who was abducting animals. Or he'd found the man's vehicle, at least. A sudden burst of joy and excitement came, then left just as suddenly. Whiskers remembered something he'd heard a human ask a dog once when it was chasing a car. "What you gonna do if you catch it?" What, indeed? If Whiskers waited, he was certain that the bad man would show up soon. But Whiskers was no match for a grown-up human. He might be able to scratch the guy, but could he stop him? Not likely. There was a better chance that Whiskers would find himself in the back of the van, taken away to who knows where, and then, if he was lucky, returned to the rescue, where he would finally be put inside one of the cages. He needed help. Fortunately, there were plenty of policemen around. Whiskers took off to find one and get them to follow him back. The play had resumed, and the crowd cheered again as Queen Gertrude returned to the stage wearing her priceless crown. Fred's stomach grumbled. He hadn't even noticed he was hungry until he'd been given the banana. Now he was watching several audience members enjoying theirs while watching the play. It would look very unprofessional to pull his out and eat it beside the stage. He turned to take a quick look at Sophie and the crown before looking back to the crowd. She was standing like a statue again, waiting for the crowd to get quiet. But they just got louder. A woman shrieked, then another. All of a sudden, there was screaming coming from several members of the audience, some of which were running away from their seats. In the middle of the chaos, Fred saw a grayish-brown fur with streaks of orange and white. Now he knew he hadn't been crazy. Now it all made sense. The tamarin monkey stolen from the zoo was running through the crowd, snatching bananas from scared ladies in ball gowns. His long white mustache bounced around as he placed a small hand on a man in a tuxedo and swung himself into the air, flying toward another banana. The man in the red cowboy boots was after the crown, and he'd pulled off his biggest distraction yet. But where was he? Fred scanned the area. He didn't see anyone moving toward the stage, only away from the monkey. With all of the yelling and screaming, he didn't even hear the whirring noise. Sophie Thorson screamed. Fred turned and saw her reach both arms up as a large drone lifted the crown from her head and flew straight up, turning into a tiny dot in the bright sky, then lost in the sun. The crown was gone. Fred looked again at Sophie. Several officers had surrounded her already. At least she was safe. But what could he do to get the crown back? He had no idea where it was headed. He started to look up again, into the sun, before a loud meow caught his attention from below. "Officer, come quick! I know where the man is who has been abducting animals." Whiskers pawed at the policeman's uniformed leg as he spoke. He knew humans couldn't understand him, but sometimes you just have to say it anyway. The policeman looked down. He shook his leg, trying to move Whiskers away before he recognized him. "You again? Can't you see I'm a little busy? I don't have time to play with your red shoes and your van and giraffe." As he said giraffe, the man's voice began to trail off. A look of bewilderment came over his face. Whiskers knew it was now or never. Either this policeman would follow him, or he'd have to give up on him and find someone smarter. He turned, took several steps away, and looked back. The officer slowly stepped toward him. Whiskers took off running. Through the backstage area, he went straight toward the street where the van was parked. Every few seconds, he turned his head to make sure he was still being followed. Another policeman yelled at the officer, "Fred, where are you going?" "You wouldn't believe me if I told you, Ronnie," Fred yelled back. Whiskers leaped up and over an orange barricade. He waited impatiently on the other side as the policeman squeezed between two barricades, untucking his uniform shirt in the process. Half a block down the street, Whiskers stopped and stood beside the white cargo van. The engine was now running, and the back doors were swung wide open. Chapter 17. Rescued. Fred gasped for air and shook his head in astonishment. The cat had led him straight to the very same van he had seen pull into the employee parking lot at the zoo. This couldn't be a coincidence. He pulled the radio from his belt and called for backup. Dispatch told him to wait until help arrived, but Fred couldn't help himself. It wasn't the precious crown he was worried about. Jewels were pretty, but they weren't living, breathing creatures. This criminal, in his greed, had cruelly separated families. For Sparky's sake, he had to make sure it ended, here and now. Fred cautiously crept around the van and peeked in the passenger side window. There was nobody inside. He pulled on the door handle, and it opened. Fred climbed inside and waited. Moments later, he heard a whirring noise. Faint at first, then louder as it got closer. Ducking down in the seat, Fred watched in the rearview mirror as the drone carrying the crown flew in through the open back doors and settled on the floor. The doors slammed shut. The driver's side door jerked open, and a man wearing a baseball cap and red cowboy boots stepped in quickly. He reached to put the vehicle in drive, and then almost jumped out of his boots when Fred said, "Howdy, partner." The man tried to open his door again, but it was too late. The door slammed against the side of Ronnie's SUV, which had just pulled up. Squad cars with lights flashing blocked the street in front and behind. He was trapped. "How in the world did you find this guy?" Ronnie asked as the man in the red cowboy boots was helped into the back of a squad car. Fred looked down at Whiskers and grinned. "I already told you, Ronnie. You wouldn't believe me." Whiskers walked up to him and rubbed up against the leg of his uniform pants. Fred reached down and picked him up. "I never thought I'd say this, but I just might be a cat person after all." A woman's voice yelled from down the street, "Get video of that!" Kendall Quinn pointed at the squad car taking the perp away, and her cameraman ran toward it, balancing the camera on his shoulder and trying to get a view of the man inside. The reporter bounced up to Ronnie. "I need another interview. Tell me all about how you caught this guy and saved the crown." "Well, I was—" He paused and looked over at Fred. "Actually, I was way over there running around the park without a clue. Fred caught the guy. He's your hero." The cameraman ran up and pointed his camera at Fred, while Kendall tried to attach a microphone to his uniform shirt. "Say your full name and spell it for us so we get it right when we make you the most famous man in town." Fred froze. "Come on, if you can catch a jewel thief, you can spell your name." Fred shook his head and gathered his wits again. "I'll be happy to answer all your questions, but not here." Allison poked her head out of the front door at the For the Love of Animals rescue. Her jaw dropped as 6 police cars pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing and sirens screaming. A television news truck followed behind them. She closed the door and locked it. Fred got out of his squad car and walked to the front door. "It's okay. You can come out." Allison slowly unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. "Go get some of our new friends, the ones I brought you." Allison closed the door again. Fred waited until he saw her walk out into the kennel area with a handful of leashes. He turned around to see Kendall Quinn and her cameraman getting set up. He stood quietly as the microphone was placed on his shirt, then said his name slowly and spelled it out even more slowly. He looked back over his shoulder until he could see Allison walking back in his direction with several animals in tow. "Okay, I'm ready now." "Detective Fred Mason, you're the hero of the day. You kept the Queen's crown from being stolen and caught the bad guy." Officer Fred Mason. I'm not a detective. Yet. But I'm working on it." Kendall shrugged it off. "How did you do it?" Allison walked out the office door and toward Fred. He waved for her to come closer. She was carrying the cat in her arms, and the bulldog, the golden retriever, and the Pomeranian on leashes at her feet. The black and white cat rubbed against Fred's leg. Saving the crown was just the icing on the cake. The man who tried to steal it is, I believe, the same man who set the snake loose at the zoo and stole the monkey yesterday. He's robbed a grocery store, a laundromat, and a pizza delivery man this week. He also stole the drone that he used to take the crown off of Sophie Thorson's head during the play. But his biggest crime was separating all of these animals from their families. That's why we're here, so that the families can see that their pets are safe and well and waiting to go home. And for all those families that don't have a pet at home," Fred waved his arm toward the kennel behind him, "there are lots of cats and dogs here that would love to be a part of a loving family. Just come talk to Allison, and she'll make sure everybody has somebody to cuddle up with." Ronnie's unmarked SUV pulled into the lot while Fred was speaking. Sophie Thorson stepped out of the back seat and walked up to Fred in front of the camera. "On behalf of the people of Denmark, thank you." The actress leaned in and planted a big kiss right on his lips. Chapter 18. Forever Home. "Hi, Sheila. I'm home." "Welcome home, Detective Mason." Sheila wore a mischievous grin. Fred was relieved. She was teasing him about the reporter's mistake and not Sophie's kiss. Maybe they hadn't shown that on TV. He'd been scared to death about what Sheila would say. "I brought a new friend home for dinner," Fred said, quickly moving on and lifting the box Allison had put the black and white cat in. Sheila pulled off the top and looked inside. "Oh, he's so handsome. You can bring him home for dinner anytime." She walked to the kitchen to get a bowl and some food. "Will he like the leftover tuna?" The cat meowed. Fred pulled it from the box and set it down. It hurried into the kitchen and brushed against Sheila's legs until she put the bowl down. Sheila watched the cat begin eating, then joined Fred where he had sat down on the sofa. "You look exhausted," Sheila said, turning the television on to the local news. Fred looked nervously between Sheila and the television. "It's been quite the day." He waited for a snappy comeback, but none came. Sheila pulled a sheet of paper from the coffee table and handed it to Fred. "About that detective thing. These are all police departments that have called this afternoon. They saw on the news that you are not a detective yet, and they all want to fix that. Fred, you can take your pick. We can go anywhere." Fred looked at the paper. California, Florida, North Carolina, Colorado, Washington. The list went on. He set the paper back on the coffee table and leaned back on the sofa. As he did, the cat jumped into his lap. "Are you sure about this, Fred? You always said you weren't a cat person." "I was wrong." Sheila smiled. "Then we need to come up with a name, unless he already has one." She looked at his collar, but there was no name tag. The cat lifted one of his front paws and stroked it against his white whiskers. "Whiskers," Fred said. "His name is Whiskers." "Welcome home, Whiskers." Sheila pointed at the television. "It looks like your friends at the rescue all found homes, too. Look at that pit bull getting into the truck. Is that a giraffe in his mouth?" Whiskers glanced at the TV, then rolled over on Fred's lap, exposing his white belly. Fred and Sheila both reached down and rubbed his soft fur. Whiskers relaxed completely, fully enjoying the belly rub. They sat together quietly on the sofa. Allison was interviewed, smiling as she shared the news that there was now a waiting list for adoptions, and she would be taking a few days off for a long overdue vacation with her husband. A couple of new volunteers would be watching over things while she was gone. A little girl was shown running up to a bulldog and screaming, "Bully!" Then the television showed footage of Sophie Thorson arriving at the animal rescue. Fred began to sweat. Sheila reached over with a tissue, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and then wiped some bright red lipstick off of Fred's lips. She burst out laughing. Epilogue. The house was quiet. Fred and Sheila had gone to bed, leaving Whiskers free to explore his new home. The word wasn't easy for him to think. It meant so much. It meant being part of a family, commitment, new things, new rituals, and saying goodbye to old things and rituals and friends, and putting behind him the hope of one day being reunited with his former family. As he silently padded through the kitchen, Whiskers thought back to the kitchen where he'd once had his meals. He remembered the last time he walked out of the cat flap into the backyard. He remembered the swing set where the family's children played, the outdoor table where they enjoyed meals on pretty days when the sun was shining and the flowers blooming. He remembered leaving the nicely manicured lawn to wander in the wilderness of the woods behind the house. And he remembered the girl, the lost girl, the crying girl. She was so young and scared. Whiskers didn't know how she got lost. He only knew that helping her find her family had suddenly become the only thing that mattered. But how? The girl was walking aimlessly, so Whiskers followed, hoping that maybe his sensitive ears or nose might help sense a clue that could point them in the right direction. Crawling on a fallen tree, they crossed the stream that Whiskers had never crossed before. Whiskers brought his thoughts back to his new home and his new family. He crept into the den and hopped back onto the sofa where he had taken a nap in Fred's lap, where he had gotten his first good belly rub in over a year. It had felt so good. He could still feel Fred and Sheila's fingers gently caressing his soft fur. He closed his eyes and took another nap. At some point in the night, Whiskers woke again. Startled at first by the unfamiliar surroundings, he quickly reoriented himself and began exploring again. Pictures of families were spread out across the den. On the walls, on the end tables, on the fireplace mantel. The families looked familiar, like Fred and Sheila, but younger, with children. They must be the children and grandchildren. He looked forward to meeting them, at least the adults. Whiskers wasn't too sure about meeting the young children. There were more pictures in the hallway, hung along the walls on both sides. Noticing one in particular, Whiskers saw a face he recognized, one he had never expected to see again. The face of a friend he met in the woods. His thoughts were back in the wilderness now, crawling through the brush, following the lost girl, listening carefully for the calls of anyone who might be looking for her. Someone must be, he'd known. The girl began to cry again and sat down. Whiskers walked up and sat in her lap. The crying stopped. The girl petted Whiskers, and it seemed to calm her down. But the crying had been heard, and someone came to investigate. A large dog stepped through a row of bushes. It was the dog in the picture. Whiskers remembered seeing his name on his collar. Sparky. The dog quietly walked up to the girl and nudged her hand with his wet nose. She was startled at first, and then she laughed. She put her small hands on each side of the dog's big face and smiled at him. "What's going on?" the dog asked Whiskers. "She's lost. I've been following her, trying to help her find her family, but no luck so far." "Well, maybe with 3 of us, we'll have better luck." Eventually, the girl stood up again and started walking. She moved faster now, but kept looking back to make sure Sparky and Whiskers were with her. They never let her out of their sight, even when they came to the fence. There was a hole under the fence, just large enough for the girl to squeeze through. Whiskers didn't have any trouble. Sparky, though, had to work at it. He stuck his big head underneath and pushed with his hind legs. He kept pushing after his collar got caught on the fence. The girl looked back and waved. "Come on," she said. Sparky pushed harder and popped through the hole, leaving his broken collar dangling from the bottom of the fence. The 3 of them kept going for hours, further into the woods with no sign of people or houses. Finally, Whiskers heard a sound that wasn't natural, a low roar off in the distance that came and went. He looked over at Sparky, who had also heard it. "Road," they both said to each other at the same time. Sparky took the lead now. He picked up the pace and moved in the direction of the sound, which grew louder. The girl followed, and Whiskers walked behind her, making sure they didn't get separated. Eventually, they stepped out of the woods onto the side of a road. It was just a 2-lane country road, but cars were steadily passing by. Whiskers, not a big fan of fast cars, stayed back in the bushes. Sparky and the girl stood at the side of the road. The next car passed them, then stopped, reversed, and pulled up beside them. The driver got out. "Emily? Are you Emily? Everybody's looking for you. It's all over the news." The woman opened the back door of her car. "May I take you to your home? Your mommy and daddy will be so happy to see you." Emily got in the car. She looked back at Sparky. "Of course your dog can come." The driver waved for Sparky to get in the car. Sparky hesitated. He looked back to where Whiskers was hiding in the brush. Then he looked again at Emily. He turned his head back one more time. "I can't leave her now." Sparky got in the car. The woman closed the door, and in just a moment, they all disappeared. Whiskers never expected to see Sparky again. But there he was, smiling on the wall in the hallway of Whiskers' new home. Home. Such a beautiful word. You've been listening to Rescued, a story of cats, dogs, crooks, and cops by Chris Abernathy. Read for you by the author. This is not the last big adventure for Whiskers. He and Fred solve many important cases together in stories that have not yet been told. Then Whiskers and Sheila embark on a brand new set of adventures that you can read about in the Detective Whiskers Cozy Mystery Series. Book 1 is Paw and Order, followed by CSI, Cat Sleuth Investigation, Miami Mice, Perder, She Wrote, Mission Impossible, Only Meowders in the Building, Police Academy, NCIS, National Cat Investigative Society, and Christmas Movie Mystery. This audiobook was produced in 2025. Copyright Right on the Mark, LLC.